So, it all kicks off in Wallachia, back in 1455. A gorgeous young woman in her 20s named Lisa decides to take a wild, reckless trip straight to Dracula's castle. She strolls past a bunch of skeletons stuck on pitchforks, but instead of turning back like any sane person, she keeps going, totally ignoring the fact that she might end up just like them. When she finally sees Dracula's castle up close, it blows her mind. Those creepy legends? Totally legit. Eventually, she makes it inside the castle, armed with nothing but a dagger to protect herself from an all-powerful, immortal vampire. Dracula spots her from afar and teleports over, curious why some random human would come knocking on his door like this. Lisa spills her guts, saying she's there to learn from his scientific knowledge so she can save lives and heal people. Her gutsy attitude throws Dracula off since, you know, humans aren't usually this brave or this smart. Intrigued, he shows her his room full of ancient wisdom. Lisa is floored by what she sees and tries to convince Dracula to give humans a second chance, even though they're cruel and superstitious. When he asks her why she cares, she says she just wants to make the world a better place. Dracula can't help but smile at her answer, and in just a few minutes of talking, he's hooked. Fast forward about 20 years, and the church accuses Lisa of practicing witchcraft and other dark arts. Under orders from Bishop Mark, they burn her at the stake. Why? Because Lisa's into chemistry, and Mark's convinced that means she's in league with the devil. Even the mayor seems curious about chemistry, but clams up when Mark gives him a dirty look. As Lisa burns, she begs Dracula not to take revenge on the humans. Mark thinks it's hilarious because he assumes she's praying to the devil. Meanwhile, Dracula finally makes it back to Lisa's village after months of traveling the world. Turns out, he and Lisa were married. He's still rocking his wedding ring. He walks a bit and finds her house in ruins, where he runs into an old woman who came to pay her respects. When Dracula asks about Lisa, the woman explains that the bishop accused her of witchcraft and took her away. She speaks kindly of Lisa, saying she was a great doctor. But when Dracula realizes his wife is dead, he's absolutely wrecked. Blood-red tears stream down his face as he regrets trying to live like a normal human just to make Lisa happy. His heartbreak quickly turns into fury, but he manages to calm himself enough to warn the old woman to pack up her family and leave the country that night. After delivering his message, Dracula transforms into a fiery form and flies off, leaving the old woman completely stunned. Back in the city, Lisa's bones crumble to ash, and the crowd cheers like it's some kind of victory. The mayor offers to take Mark out for some drinks, but Mark turns him down, saying he needs to meet the archbishop. While these two clowns are chatting, the fire behind them starts raging harder, and out of nowhere, Dracula shows up. Everyone's stunned, but Dracula doesn't waste time and demands to know why his wife was burned alive. Mark fires back, saying Lisa was into witchcraft. Then, he takes it a step further and disrespects Dracula by calling him some made-up nonsense from black magic. Dracula's mad but keeps his cool, promising to wipe out all the humans in Wallachia in a year. He warns them to pack up and leave if they want to live. After dropping the bombshell, Dracula takes off, and the sky literally starts raining fire. Back at his castle, Dracula's fury boils over. He's smashing books, breaking bottles, and plotting his revenge. He's ready to summon an army straight from hell to go after the humans. But his son, Alucard, storms in and shuts down the idea, saying revenge like that will only make things worse. Alucard begs his dad to just go after the person who killed Lisa and leave it at that. But Dracula's not having it. He argues that if humans were decent, someone would have stood up for Lisa instead of letting her die over some bogus accusations. Dracula's hatred for humans hits a new level, but what really sets him off is when Alucard says he'll stop him. That's the last straw. Dracula attacks his own son, and well, you can guess how that turns out. Fast forward a year later, and the people of Wallachia are celebrating at the church in Targoviste, thinking they dodged Dracula's wrath. The archbishop, who's so fat he can't even walk, gets carried in by priests while his followers cheer him on. He starts mocking Dracula's threats like it's all a joke, but then the sky turns blood red, and it literally starts raining blood. The guy doesn't realize he's doomed until an earthquake hits. He falls, and a shard of glass stabs him right in the chest. The church catches fire, and the flames rise into the sky, forming Dracula's face. The archbishop is so scared he wets himself. Dracula shows up in the sky, reminding everyone he gave them a whole year to leave, but instead, they stayed to mock him. With zero mercy, he unleashes a swarm of demons to tear everyone apart. It's a massacre. Within minutes, Targoviste is a bloody mess, with body parts everywhere. Once the slaughter's over, Dracula shows up again and orders his demons to spread the carnage to the rest of Wallachia. A few days later, two idiots in a bar are chatting about some guy who was in love with a goat. Yeah, let's not even go there. Anyway, their weird conversation gets someone's attention. Then, out of nowhere, a panicked villager runs into the bar, freaking out about Dracula's demon army. But instead of focusing on the danger, this loudmouth named Boscha starts ranting about the big families who always hold power. When he mentions the Belmont family, it grabs the attention of someone in the bar, and you just know things about to go south. Boscha is going off about how much he hates the Belmont family, and this dude sitting in the back is just soaking it all in, hanging on to every word. At some point, Basha heads over to the bartender to grab more drinks. While fishing around in his pocket for coins, he spots a crest on the guy's vest and realizes he's from the Belmont family. The guy tries to deny it at first, but things heat up fast when Basha starts accusing his family of causing the attacks on humans. Basha's convinced the Belmonts are into some dark magic, and that their shady dealings brought Dracula's demons into the mix. Hearing all this, the Belmont guy tries to dip, but Basha isn't having it. He clocks him right in the face, then follows up with a kick to the family jewels. Yeah, probably ended his bloodline right there. While writhing in pain, the guy finally admits he's Trevor Belmont, but Trevor's no pushover. He counters Basha's next move and takes him down. Suddenly, it's a full-on brawl as 3 other guys in the bar jump Trevor at the same time. The first 2 are no big deal for Trevor, but the third dude manages to knock him out. Not done yet, they kick Trevor in the nuts again, and this time he's begging for mercy, asking them to spare his future kids. Round 2 kicks off when Trevor pulls himself together. He takes down Basha's crew one by one, giving them a solid beating. After all that, he stumbles outside, pukes his guts out, and crashes under a tree for the night. When he wakes up the next morning, he heads out of the woods and spots the city of Gresset up ahead. Over in Gresset, things are grim. Dracula's demons have the place in chaos. Wives are found dead, kids are gone, and the whole city's drowning in bloodshed. Trevor sneaks into the city through a waste pipe, just trying to score some breakfast. On the other side, he spots some kids dumping a pile of corpses under a bridge. Shaking it off, he heads to the market, grabs a piece of meat, and starts chowing down to kill his hunger. While eating, he chats with a weapons dealer who tells him this wild story about a sleeping soldier, supposedly a hero, who's buried in the catacombs. Trevor finds it kind of funny, but shrugs it off, and moves on to learn more about what's going on in the city. Everyone he talks to is freaking out about the demons and blaming a group of speakers for the attacks. Later, Trevor spots 2 priests roughing up an old speaker in some alley. It's pissing him off, but he's trying hard not to step in. That changes when the priests threaten to kill the old man. Trevor can't hold back anymore. He steps in and cracks his whip, knocking the weapon right out of one priest's hand. The bearded priest starts whining in pain and yells at his bald buddy to go after Trevor. Baldy charges at him like an idiot, and Trevor makes him pay for it. He dodges all of Baldy's attacks and finishes the fight by whipping the dude's left eye clean out of its socket. As Baldy's freaking out over his busted eye, Trevor tells the bearded priest to scram and never mess with the old man again. Once they're gone, the old man thanks Trevor for stepping in and saving him from the priests. He agrees to let Trevor walk him back to his place. On the way, the old guy, who's called Elder, spills that there are 11 of his people in town, but one of them is missing. When they get to the house, Trevor meets the rest of the crew, who turn out to be helping folks in need. Turns out, Trevor knows a thing or two about these people, called speakers, because someone in his family had dealt with them before. He cuts to the chase and asks why they're in Gresset. One of them starts to explain, but Trevor butts in, saying the locals are blaming them for the demon attacks. Elder claps back, saying that's just church propaganda, and that the church is the real reason Dracula's demons are here. He brings up Lisa, who was burned at the stake in Targovist for no good reason, and Trevor realizes how messed up the whole situation is. When Trevor presses again, Elder says they're in Gresset because the town's a wreck and people need help. He's determined to take care of the sick and injured, even with all the chaos going on. Elder also mentions something about a sleeping savior, but Trevor brushes it off as a fairy tale. It doesn't take long for Trevor to figure out that the missing speaker went looking for this so-called savior. Trevor doesn't seem too bothered and tells the speakers they should bail before they get themselves killed. That's when one of them drops the bombshell that the missing person is Elder's daughter. Hearing that, Trevor reluctantly offers to go find her, or at least her body, so Elder and his people can get out of town. After the chat, Trevor heads out. That afternoon, the guy heads west of the church in Gresset and steps into a building that leads down to the catacombs. Once inside, he lights up a torch to check out his surroundings. He hears a noise coming from below and decides to track it down. As he goes down the stairs, the floor gives out, and he crashes to the level below. Then, just his luck, he trips and falls again when he tries to walk. After shaking it off, he gets back on his feet and spots Elder's granddaughter, turned to stone. As he moves closer, a giant cyclops barges in and tries to turn him to stone too. Trevor's gotta think fast and fights for his life, dodging the cyclops' magic laser. Using his smaller size and speed, he sets up a trap to outsmart the beast. His plan works, and he lands a killer blow to the cyclops' eye with his dagger. The monster drops dead, and its magic fades, freeing Elder's granddaughter from her stone prison. Once she's back to normal, the girl starts rambling about finding some sleeping savior, but Trevor's not having it. He's over all the fairy tale nonsense and shuts her down, even telling her that everyone thinks she's dead. Shocked, the girl introduces herself as Sypha Belnades, but Trevor couldn't care less. Eventually, Trevor starts heading back to Elder's house, with Sypha tagging along behind him. When they get there, Elder is over the moon to see Sypha alive since he thought she was gone for good. But Trevor doesn't waste time and tells the speakers they need to get out of the city. The whole sleeping savior thing comes up again, and Trevor shoots it down, saying there's no way it's true. He points out the Cyclops in the building and how the place looks like Dracula's castle. Elder is stunned when Trevor flat out says that whatever's under the catacombs isn't a savior. As Trevor walks off, Sypha mutters something about him being rude and hopes bad things happen to him. Later, Trevor gets ambushed by some priests who say the bishop wants to see him. Even though he's been kicked out of the church, Trevor agrees to go along with them. They take him to the church, where the not all there Bishop Mark is hanging out. As soon as Trevor sees him, he knows this guy isn't from Gresset. They start talking, and Trevor asks why Mark's got it out for the speakers. Mark goes on about how non-believers supposedly attract demons, and even says burning Lisa was the right thing to do, with zero regrets. Cutting to the chase, Mark offers Trevor a deal. Stay out of his business with the speakers, and he gets to keep his life. He warns Trevor to get out of the city by sundown, or else he won't live to see the next morning. So, Trevor realizes that Mark's way of looking at good, bad, right, and wrong is super narrow-minded. Mark tries to defend his family, but Trevor chills out when he notices how clueless the bishop is when it comes to logic. In the end, Trevor bails on the church and heads straight to Elder's place to give them a heads up. He breaks it down for Elder, telling him and his crew they've got to skip town before sundown, or they're toast. Even with the danger, Sypha says she can't just ditch the helpless folks in Gresset. Elder jumps in, saying the church is straight up lying to the people and leading them astray. He reminds Trevor about all the bogus stuff the church spread about his family to keep people from dealing with them. This makes Trevor rethink his stance, but he still decides to get the speakers out of the building. By sundown, the night creatures gear up to attack Gresset, and the townsfolk grab their weapons, ready to go after the speakers. In no time, almost the whole town shows up outside Elder's house with pitchforks and torches. Someone busts in, only to find out the speakers are gone. Trevor's still there though, and when the priests press him, he tells them the speakers are safe. Meanwhile, Elder and his crew are hiding out in the catacombs where the Cyclops was taken down. Back on the surface, Trevor refuses to give up the speakers, and for that, he gets slapped around a few times. Things heat up when Trevor pulls out his dagger, ready to throw down with 5 priests. He kicks things off, takes a few swings, and then bails. Outside, he targets a giant crucifix, making it crash down and freak out the townspeople. While they're distracted, Trevor bolts and ducks into an alley. On the way, more priests jump him, and Baldy shows up again for another embarrassing beatdown. Trevor whips out his sword, dodges Baldy's attacks, and uses him as a human shield against incoming arrows. Baldy's last good eye gets hit, leaving him completely blind. The fight ends fast as Trevor wipes out the priests around him. Meanwhile, up in the sky, a swarm of flying demons circles Gresset, ready to feast on the town for the night. In the middle of all the chaos outside, screams, blood, the whole 9 yards, Bishop Mark is chilling inside the church, nose deep in a book, totally zoned out. When the door creaks open, he grins, thinking the speakers are toast. But then it hits him. The demons are coming for him. Turns out, Mark cut a shady deal with the demons. The speakers would be dead by sundown. That's why he was so dead set on getting rid of them. But then, this flamboyant demon strolls in, flashing a creepy smile, and starts talking about how much he loves Mark's flesh. His snarky comments send shivers down Mark's spine because, yeah, he knows he's totally screwed. In the end, the demon turns Mark into a snack, literally, and devours him. Meanwhile, Trevor's somewhere in the city, running for dear life. Before he knows it, he's surrounded by a mob of pissed off civilians, but Sypha shows up just in time, throwing down some fire magic to protect him. She clears a path so he can get away without getting mobbed. Not long after, Trevor spots this sketchy bearded priest and calls him out for a fight. The priest, clearly freaking out, pulls out a dagger and starts backing away, realizing Trevor means business. Trevor uses the moment to call out the priest in front of the crowd, pointing out how messed up it is for a priest to be packing a weapon like that. Then he spills the tea on all the shady stuff the priest has done, including how Bishop Mark's actions brought Dracula's wrath down on humanity. This gets the crowd fired up, and they end up stabbing the priest to death. Suddenly, a loud explosion in the distance grabs everyone's attention. The demons are tearing people apart and heading straight for Trevor's spot. Trevor steps up and takes charge of the villagers, telling them to follow his lead since his family's got a rep for demon slaying. He asks for holy water and salt to fight the demons, while some of the villagers grab pitchforks and get ready to rumble. Sypha creates this icy wall to funnel the demons toward the pitchfork crew. Once the back of the wall is sealed, the demons charge in, trying to kill everyone. On Trevor's orders, the pitchfork crew goes at the demons, while the others use the salt and holy water to take them down. Things get wild when Trevor busts out his magic whip and smacks a demon with it. The thing screams in pain before straight up exploding from the inside. Seeing this, the villagers get hyped and start fighting harder. But the demon who ate Bishop Mark has it out for Trevor. He charges at him, but Sypha sets a trap, and the demon gets frozen in place. While stuck in the ice, the demon starts ranting about having backup from hell, but Trevor doesn't let him finish. He ends the demon with his whip, and the demon's explosion causes the ground to cave in. Trevor and Sypha fall into the hole as the chaos continues. On the flip side, Trevor learns the hard way that the place is rigged with traps. Freaked out, he bolts with Sypha, dodging massive boulders trying to crush them. But things go from bad to worse when they reach the gear room. One of the big gears crashes to the ground, and both of them barely cling to a sturdy metal frame to avoid falling to their deaths. They finally make it to a deeper part of the building, but Trevor accidentally steps on a button that unlocks a coffin in the middle of the room. The coffin opens, and Sypha is stunned when Alucard steps out. Trevor isn't convinced, even though Sypha's story might check out. He's suspicious, thinking Alucard could be Dracula, since no one alive knows what the infamous vampire looks like. The fact that Alucard Alucard's a vampire only fuels Trevor's distrust. Alucard keeps his cool despite Trevor's attitude, but challenges him to a fight to see what he's made of. The battle kicks off, and Alucard uses magic to summon his sword. Trevor doesn't waste a second, whipping out his enchanted whip to attack, but his moves aren't enough to take Alucard down. He keeps his distance, striking with his whip, but Alucard dodges every attack and closes in fast. Even so, Trevor lands an aerial strike that knocks Alucard to the ground. Alucard recovers in no time and disarms Trevor, tossing his whip aside. Round 2 begins as Trevor switches to his sword. Alucard moves so fast that Trevor has to rely on pure instinct to keep up, but it's clear he's outmatched by Alucard's speed. Things take a turn when Trevor goes low and kicks Alucard right in the family jewels. "Have some class!" Alucard snaps after the dirty move. He retaliates by slicing through Trevor's knife and knocking him out cold with a punch. As Trevor lies on the ground, barely hanging on, Alucard moves in for the final blow, but Trevor stabs him with a dagger, smirking at the thought of killing Dracula's son. Alucard, still defiant, threatens to drink Trevor's blood. Just then, Sypha shows up with a fireball in hand, ready to roast Alucard. When Alucard realizes Sypha's a speaker, he backs off and lets Trevor go. Turns out, the whole fight was a test to see if they were tough enough to stand up to demons. Alucard opens up about his past, explaining how his father punished him for opposing the slaughter of humanity. In the end, Alucard suits up and agrees to team up with Trevor and Sypha to end the war against humanity. About a year ago, before Lisa got snatched up by the church, she was the go-to healer in her village. One of her patients was Mrs. Juvara, who had trouble breathing. Lisa checked out her symptoms, went to her workshop, and whipped up the perfect remedy. She told Mrs. Juvara she'd feel better in 5 days if she stuck to the dosage. As Lisa was walking her out, she spotted Bishop Mark and his crew of priests nearby. The way one of the priests gave Mrs. Juvara a look made it seem like she had tipped them off. The bishop barged into Lisa's house, accusing her of witchcraft. Things went south fast when one of the priests saw her centrifuge and totally freaked out, which convinced the bishop she was a witch. Lisa tried to explain it was just science, but the bishop wasn't having it. They tied her up, and as they dragged her out, she begged the bishop not to hurt her, warning him it could bring trouble his way. The bishop twisted her words, thinking she was threatening him, and ordered her house burned to the ground. Just like that, all of Lisa's work went up in flames. Now, it's 1576, and Dracula is still grieving his wife, Lisa. After staying in his chambers for a while, Dracula heads to the war room to meet his generals. He kicks off the meeting by ranting about how much he despises humans. He's dead set on wiping them out of Wallachia and turning the land over to his demons. The generals don't look too thrilled about his plan, but Dracula lets the 2 humans in his council, Isaac and Hector, share the next steps for the war. Godbrand, one of the generals, gets ticked off and starts complaining about humans being part of the war council. Dracula shuts him down, explaining why he trusts Isaac and Hector. He says they hate humans as much as he does and aren't driven by greed or bloodlust. After dropping this, Dracula ends the meeting and leaves. Once he's gone, Godbrand goes off, grumbling about having to answer to humans. Isaac claps back with a sarcastic comment that bruises Godbrand's ego. Later, Isaac and Hector leave the war council and meet up with Dracula in his chambers. They're curious and ask him why he picked them to lead the war council. Dracula explains that his other generals are too caught up in their own desires, while Isaac and Hector are disciplined and focused on the mission. Hearing this, Isaac and Hector start to see why Dracula trusts them so much. During the conversation, Hector gets lost in thought, remembering the awful things his parents did to him when he was a kid. Meanwhile, Isaac doubles down on his promise to help Dracula wipe out humanity. The next day, over in Greasit, some folks are busy fixing up the city while others are taking care of the demon corpses. Sypha waves goodbye to her grandpa, feeling bummed out now that it's just her and Trevor. As the old man rides off, Trevor shows up and tries to cheer her up, but he totally botches it with some dumb comments. It gets so bad that Sypha has to straight up tell him what to say. At least she gets where he's coming from in the end. Meanwhile, Alucard is chilling by himself in a busted up building, sketching a picture of his parents. While he's at it, he thinks about his dad and can't stand the fact that he's gonna have to go against him to save the world. He really misses his mom and hates what he's gotta do to make peace with humans. He starts tearing up, but quickly pulls himself together when Trevor shows up behind him. Over at Dracula's castle, Hector's in his workshop doing some alchemy, trying to summon a demon into a fresh body. Godbrand walks in, apologizing for snapping earlier in the war meeting, but then cuts to the chase. He asks Hector what he thinks about how the war's going, saying it feels like a hot mess with no real game plan, just vampires wrecking humanity for the heck of it. Hector fires back, saying maybe that's exactly what Dracula wants, but he also starts wondering if Godbrand might have a point. Right then, a bunch of servant vampires barge in with fresh corpses from Greasit for Hector to work on. Among the bodies is the bishop, and Hector thinks he'd make a killer beast with fangs. The chat with Godbrand wraps up as Hector uses his enchanted weapon to summon a demon. He pauses when the whole castle shakes. It turns out Dracula's moving the castle to a new spot in the countryside. country. Just like that, the castle vanishes and pops up somewhere else, wiping out everything caught in the magical field. Back in Gresset, Trevor and Sypha link up with Alucard and start talking about Dracula's moving castle. Sypha thinks it's just some made-up story, but Alucard shuts that down, saying his dad's castle really can move. Apparently, it's all thanks to magic. Trevor then suggests they head over to his old family estate, the Belmont estate, because that's where all the tools and knowledge needed to take down Dracula are stashed. Sypha's on board with the plan, but of course, those two can't help throwing petty jabs at each other whenever they get the chance. As the sun sets, Sypha, Alucard, and Trevor leave Gresset and hit the road toward the Belmont estate. Meanwhile, over in Dracula's war room, things are a mess. The generals are at it again, bickering non-stop. Not even Dracula's presence can get them to chill. Then, a new vampire walks in and steals the spotlight. Her name's Carmilla, and she's from Styria. She's got that strong, no-nonsense vibe going on. After showing her respect to Dracula, she wastes no time calling out the fact that the war room is a hot mess. Then she really pushes Dracula's buttons by asking why he didn't turn Lisa into a vampire to save her life when he had the chance. Everyone in the room is shook, but Dracula keeps his cool just enough to tell Carmilla to meet him in his chambers. Later, in their private meeting, Carmilla tries to act slick, but Dracula's not having it, and she quickly drops the act. When she speaks, she claims she didn't mean any disrespect. She doubles down on her earlier comments, saying the generals were already wondering the same thing, so she just said it out loud. Then she spins it, making it sound like she only brought it up to help Dracula address the issue with his generals. The meeting wraps up, and Carmilla leaves with a sly smile, clearly up to something. That night, Trevor and the crew set up camp in the woods. At some point, Sypha gets curious and asks Alucard why he doesn't burn up in the sunlight. He explains that he's half human, half vampire. He starts talking about his dad and how Lisa was a doctor, which leaves Trevor kind of speechless. Even though Trevor's skeptical, it's clear that Dracula's not just some monster. He's a guy who's into science and philosophy and knows way more than most humans ever will. Alucard goes on about his dad's vision for the world, which includes wiping out humanity entirely, but he stops mid-story when he hears something weird in the woods. Moments later, demons show up and attack the group. Alucard jumps into action and takes out the first two demons with lightning-fast moves. The next two rush him at the same time, but he doesn't even break a sweat holding them off. Trevor eventually joins the fight, using his spear to take out both demons. Then, more demons show up, spitting fireballs from their mouths. That's when Sypha steps in, using her magic to redirect all the flames. She even uses her powers to tank some hellfire straight from a demon's gut. When the demon tries to fire again, she focuses the flames inside him and blows him to pieces. After the explosion, one demon manages to escape and flies off to report to his bosses. Later that night, Isaac is in his workshop, whipping his own back. Blood drips down as he remembers when his old master used to do the same thing to him. Back in the day, when Isaac was a slave, his master beat him for poking around the workshop. When the master asked why, Isaac said he just wanted to learn and help. The master cooled off for a second but then kept whipping him, saying he needed to be taught a lesson. That's when Isaac snapped. He attacked the guy and stabbed him right through the eyes, killing him. Now Isaac believes there's no such thing as love in the world. Godbrand shows up with some servants carrying the demon that escaped Sypha's magic. He talks to Isaac about the demon from Argus, but then asks why Isaac keeps whipping himself. Isaac says it helps him stay calm and disciplined. Godbrand, as weirded out as he is, decides not to push it. Instead, he leaves, throwing some snarky comment about Isaac doing his voodoo on the dead demon. Once he's alone, Isaac sets the whip aside and gets to work on the demon. He feels bad for the creature but still cuts it open and uses alchemy to bring it back to life. Afterward, he leaves his workshop and heads to the war room to meet Dracula and the other generals. There, Isaac and Godbrand talk about the demon squad that got attacked near Argus. Carmilla interrupts, suggesting Dracula send his army to a city called Brayla. She says taking Brayla will stop humans from running away from Wallachia, but some vampires don't like the idea since Brayla is surrounded by water. The room erupts into arguments until Dracula demands silence. Isaac speaks up against Carmilla's plan, but Hector argues that Brayla is their best shot at winning the war. Things get tense when Carmilla hears Isaac mention Alucard teaming up with a Belmont at Gresset. She freaks out because she knows how dangerous Belmonts can be when it comes to killing vampires. Furious, she suggests raiding the Belmont estate to destroy anything that could wipe out their kind. Now, Dracula is stuck trying to decide whether to go along with her plan or not. Back when Hector was a kid, he was a sharp little dude who loved animals. One day, he stumbled across a dead dog on a farm and felt bad for it. But here's the kicker. He brought the dog back to life. Sure, the dog didn't look totally normal, but Hector didn't care. He played with it and grew attached. When he brought it home, his mom totally lost it when she saw the dog. Now, in the present, Hector's thinking back on that moment while he's summoning a demon into a new body. At first, the demon's all aggressive and stuff, but it chills out when it realizes Hector's the boss. Meanwhile, Carmilla's watching from the sidelines and decides she wants to chat with Hector. She starts talking to him, making sure to hype up his smarts and skills first. Then she dives into the real reason she's there. Dracula's been acting all moody lately. Hector admits he's worried about Dracula, saying the guy's been kind of all over the place. Carmilla, playing it cool, casually suggests sending a group to the Belmont estate to see what Hector thinks about it, but Hector shuts that down, saying Dracula would need to sign off on something like that. Carmilla's curious and asks Hector how he even met Dracula in the first place. Hector explains that Dracula showed up at his house in Rhodes after Lisa's death, looking for help to summon demons from hell. When Hector asked why, Dracula said humans had killed his wife. The guy was clearly heartbroken, and Hector could feel his pain. Hector agreed to help, but only if humans would be treated like livestock for vampires, with their population kept in check to meet the blood demand. Back in the present, Carmilla listens to all this, and then asks if demons are loyal to whoever summons them. When Hector says yes, she leans in and suggests sending a group to Brayla and convincing Dracula to attack the place. Later that night, Trevor and his crew are trekking through the woods and finally reach the Belmont estate. Trevor spots a seal that leads to his family's research. Alucard takes a closer look and senses something weird about it. Trevor mentions some ancient technique to open it, but admits he never learned it because his family got kicked out before he had the chance. Sypha steps in, using magic and old-school languages to crack it open. After a few spells, the seal just disappears. Trevor takes charge, trying to protect his family's legacy from Alucard, who's accusing them of using dark magic. As they go deeper into the building, Sypha finds a creepy library and uses her fire magic to light the place up. The sight of neatly arranged books and cool artifacts blows her mind because she can check out as many as she wants. Meanwhile, Alucard's got this personal vendetta to trash-talk the place every chance he gets. Since the Belmont family originally comes from France, Sypha asks Trevor why they're even hanging out in Wallachia in the first place. Chasing down Dracula, Alucard says while staring at some vampire skulls. Trevor, feeling kinda awkward, decides to dodge the convo and shows Sypha a few books instead. At some point, he spots a treasure chest that totally grabs his attention. He pulls it out for a closer look and bam, memories come flooding back. Using a knife, he pops the locks, and even the magic lock on it fades away. When he opens the chest, he lights up, seeing a legendary whip his family used back in the day. It's called the Morning Star, but Sypha's not super impressed. She's too into the books and half checking to see if Alucard's enjoying himself. She kinda forgets the whole building is dedicated to wiping out Alucard's kind. Meanwhile, Godbrand sneaks off to Dracula's chambers for a private chat. Once he gets the green light to talk, he straight up asks what vampires are supposed to eat if all the humans are wiped out. He's like, where's the blood gonna come from? Dracula suggests stockpiling blood and maybe feeding on animals, but Godbrand's not about that life. The idea of drinking pig blood grosses him out, even though Dracula promises he'll be fine. Godbrand keeps pushing the issue until Dracula loses his cool and backs him into a corner. Dude's confidence evaporates and he's gulping nervously, just praying to make it out alive. After a long string of insults from Dracula, he finally gets to leave. On his way out, he runs into Carmilla and vents, saying Dracula's lost it. He even mentions that Dracula looks like he hasn't had a proper meal in ages. When Carmilla asks why Dracula would starve himself, Godbrand straight up says it's a death wish. He's convinced Dracula wants to join his wife in the afterlife and take the whole vampire race down with him. As he storms off, Carmilla tells him to stick around, but he assumes she's trying to hook up. That ticks her off, so she kicks him down the stairs. While he's lying there in pain, she steps on him and spills the tea about her plan to take Dracula out of the picture. At the crack of dawn, Godbrand charges into the woods, going full savage on innocent humans just to satisfy his bloodlust. This insecure dude doesn't hold back, slaughtering people left and right, even tossing one poor soul off a cliff. But plot twist, he wakes up and realizes it was all just a messed up dream. Bro's so thirsty for blood he's literally dreaming about killing people. Then, someone hands him a pig for breakfast, and suddenly he's starting to consider Carmilla's plan. Meanwhile, over at the Belmont estate, Trevor stumbles across this weird mirror and asks what the deal is. Alucard checks it out and explains it's a mirror that lets stuff pass through it. Then he flips the script, saying it's actually a remote viewing mirror that shows places far away. To top it off, he calls the Belmont estate a junkyard, which of course gets under Trevor's skin. Before Trevor can clap back, Sypha pulls him aside and tells him to chill and not take Alucard's bait. She distracts him by cracking jokes about his name, and Trevor can't help but laugh. Meanwhile, Alucard is glaring at the mirror like it personally insulted him. Back in Dracula's castle, Carmilla is busy planting doubts in Hector's head, trying to turn him against Dracula. She points out that if Dracula really cared about Lisa, he would have turned her into a vampire to keep her safe. Hector mulls it over and admits that Dracula's motives are kind of murky. Carmilla seizes the moment, telling him that someone so confused shouldn't be leading a war. She even freaks him out a little by reminding him that he's human, and this whole war is against humans. When Hector's had enough, he pushes back, saying Dracula promised not to wipe out the entire human race, but Carmilla keeps going, suggesting that Dracula might not be above lying. She straight up asks Hector if he's ready to ditch Dracula to win the war. Now Hector's stuck in a tough spot, so he pulls Carmilla into his workshop to keep their convo private. Carmilla doesn't let up, laying out her plan to overthrow Dracula when the castle reaches Brayla. She's not giving up on Hector either. Eventually, Hector caves, admitting that Dracula's too powerful to take on. That's all Carmilla needs to hear. She smirks and glances at the corpses lying around. A little later, Dracula leaves the castle and drops by Isaac's place. They start reminiscing about how they first met. Back in the day, Isaac was being hunted by magicians magicians who planned to sell his body parts for rare ingredients and magical trinkets, but Dracula swooped in and saved him, becoming the only person who ever had his back. Isaac's talking about the present and straight up says he's loyal to Dracula. Meanwhile, Dracula's over here raging about how humans have stabbed him in the back again, and now he's dead set on wiping them all out. Isaac, even though he's human, doesn't seem to care about this plan. He's all in, seeing Dracula as some next level being and ready to ride or die for him. While that's going down, Godbrand rounds up a squad of vampires to chase some dream he's been cooking up. After a while, Dracula shows up at the castle, uses his magic mirror to yeet Lisa's coat somewhere random, and then heads out of his room. But as he's walking around, he starts noticing something's off with his crew. Even Hector, who's supposed to be one of his top guys. Dracula ends up in Isaac's workshop, venting about how his people are acting shady. He brings up Hector too, but Isaac cracks a joke, calling Hector a little kid. Turns out, Isaac knows Hector made some shady deal with Dracula and got played. Still, Isaac shrugs it off, saying Dracula doesn't owe anyone the truth anyway. Meanwhile, Godbrand and his crew of hangry vampires hit up a nearby village, breaking into houses and causing chaos. Honestly, I've never seen a vampire as trashy as Godbrand. Dude's a hot mess. Some vampires just drink blood, but this guy and his squad go full psycho, slaughtering humans left and right. Back at the Belmont estate, it's freezing in the library, and Sypha's so cold she actually lets Trevor wrap her up in his gross, smelly blanket. While she's trying to ignore the stink, she talks about Alucard, saying he feels completely empty, like he's way past being just depressed. She describes him as this cold, hollow void whenever she's around him. Trevor tries to jump in and defend being sad, but before he can finish, he notices Sypha's already passed out. Godbrand eventually heads back to Dracula's castle and makes his way to Isaac's workshop. Big mistake. He starts running his mouth about Carmilla's plans, saying they make more sense than Dracula's chaotic war strategy. Isaac picks up on the vibes and realizes Godbrand's thinking about betraying Dracula. As Godbrand turns to leave, Isaac doesn't waste any time. He lashes him from behind and tears his throat open. This loudmouth vampire, who's all talk, is suddenly crying and trying to protect himself from a human. But Isaac's not done. He whips him again, pins him to the ground, and then finishes him off, stabbing him and sending his sorry, traitorous soul straight back to hell. The next day, Isaac is chilling outside Dracula's castle, scattering Godbrand's ashes to pay his respects. Meanwhile, Carmilla's using her magic mirror to chat with her crew back in Styria. She's telling them to gather up at Bryla before Dracula's castle shows up there. Her convo gets interrupted by a knock at the door, and when she checks, it's her informant letting her know Godbrand's missing. Little does she know, Isaac's out there spreading Godbrand's ashes, the very guy she's trying to track down. Over at the Belmont estate, Alucard and Sypha are still digging through books, trying to find something useful. Sypha starts venting about how her people pass down knowledge by word of mouth instead of writing it down, saying it's limiting and they should really think about jotting things down. But Alucard seems more focused on how close Sypha and Trevor are getting. He thinks Trevor's not exactly the greatest guy, and that Sypha's letting herself get distracted. Eventually, Sypha catches on to Alucard's little games and realizes he's just trying to make Trevor prove himself. While all this is going on, Sypha stumbles across an important book and asks for another one to help her translate the languages in it. As she's working through it, Alucard casually mentions how his dad taught him a ton of stuff as a kid. He slips up and reveals he aged quickly, and Sypha doesn't miss the chance to tease him, calling him a kid stuck in a grown-up's body. Elsewhere, Hector takes Isaac out of Dracula's castle for a private talk. Isaac's a bit suspicious of Hector at this point, but decides to hear him out. In the woods, Hector talks about how the war room's falling apart, and suggests moving the castle to Brayla to get everyone back on the same page. Isaac's not totally sold on the idea since it would give Carmilla an advantage, but he eventually agrees, thinking it might at least tone down her scheming. They end the convo with a laugh after Isaac cracks a joke about Godbrand. Afterward, Hector heads to Carmilla and lets her know everything's going as planned. Carmilla's feeling pretty smug about it because not only did Hector get Isaac on board, but he's also set up for some demons to attack the Belmont estate. Next on her agenda is having Hector convince Isaac to pitch the Brayla idea to Dracula. Once Dracula agrees, she plans to use the opportunity to team up with Isaac and push Dracula into moving the castle to Brayla. As expected, Isaac goes to Dracula and lays out the plan to relocate the castle. When asked why, Isaac spills the beans that Hector isn't vibing with the war room situation. Dracula starts doubting Hector's loyalty, but Isaac backs him up, saying Hector's still on their side. Dracula takes a minute to process this, then says he's cool with moving the castle as long as humans keep suffering. Back in the day, Dracula wasn't always this moody and fed up. One time, some merchants from Kronstadt disrespected him, so he did some recon on their town. When he attacked, the men sent their women into the woods for safety, but came back to grab their loot. Dracula was watching the whole thing and decided to make an example out of them. He tore them apart, literally. Heads chopped off, throats slashed, nuts crushed, hearts smashed, you name it. It was brutal. Dracula was so into it that he actually enjoyed the carnage. He even drained one poor guy of blood and left him to die while another dude begged for his life. Dracula let him live, but only to feed him to his crew, who were watching the chaos from the sidelines. lines. At one point, Dracula flew up to check out the area, but some dumb archer in a tower decided to take a shot at him. Big mistake. With no way to escape, the guy got a nasty bite to the throat for his trouble. Turns out, 40 merchants had disrespected Dracula, and he made sure not to kill more than 40 people. In the end, he stuck their bodies on pitchforks for the women of the town to see. Dracula tells Isaac about these good times, but wraps it up by saying that death doesn't mean anything to him anymore. Not long after, Carmilla walks in with Hector and talks Dracula into moving the castle to Brela. As Hector leaves, Dracula tells Carmilla to let him know when it's time to move. Isaac leaves too, promising to stick by Dracula until the move is done. Meanwhile, Carmilla starts showing Hector her manipulative side. She takes control of the situation and messes with his head, convincing him to follow her since he's already betrayed Dracula. Now Hector's totally screwed and has to play along with Carmilla to survive. Later that evening, Sypha is reading a book and gets super hyped when she finds a spell that can lock Dracula's castle in one spot. She explains it to Alucard and Trevor, but then the whole library starts shaking. Alucard senses trouble, and sure enough, demons show up at the library's entrance. More demons show up at the entrance of the underground library, trying to bust through the seal. One of them, armed with a magic spear, can't even scratch it, but another one doubles in size and starts smashing at it with brute strength. The hits cause the whole library to shake like crazy. Down below, Alucard grabs the enchanted mirror and marks it so Sypha can start casting her spell on it. Trevor, meanwhile, is stuck in his head, debating whether to stay with Sypha or head out and risk getting killed. Alucard's pep talk snaps him out of it, and Trevor, being his reckless self, decides to charge out and fight the demons. The shaking gets worse as the demons keep pounding on the seal, and eventually, one of them hits hard enough to crack it open. As Trevor climbs higher in the building, Alucard activates the mirror and locks it onto Dracula's castle. At the same time, Dracula himself steps into the cockpit chamber and teleports the castle to Brela. The castle vanishing from its original spot throws Alucard for a loop, but he quickly tracks it down in its new location. Over in Brela, the castle pops up, and a bunch of terrified people scramble to get to safety. Alucard finds the castle in no time, but Trevor's busy throwing down with a massive demon. He pulls out the Morningstar Whip to give himself a fighting chance, but he can't quite land a clean hit on the demon's throat. Even after getting slammed to the ground, Trevor bounces back and drives his sword into the demon's neck. The demon, confused and panicking, tries to grab him but ends up losing a limb and his life. Trevor barely has time to catch his breath before another demon jumps him. Meanwhile, Hector leaves Dracula's castle with Carmilla, who's dragging along the zombified corpse of Bishop Mark. Most of Dracula's army starts crossing a bridge to invade the city on the other side. Right when they hit the middle of the bridge, Carmilla orders the bishop to turn the whole river into holy water. As the rotting bishop starts casting his spell, Carmilla's troops get into position in the city, waiting for her signal. Someone gives the order to blow up the bridge, and all hell breaks loose. Dracula's soldiers fall into the river one by one and get vaporized instantly. Some of Dracula's generals, realizing they've been betrayed, hightail it back to the castle. Elsewhere, Trevor's still fighting for his life against a demon with some serious skills. He moves fast, dodging most of the demon's attacks, and eventually outsmarts it, pinning it to the ground with his whip. But then, another demon swoops in from above, charging up a fireball in its gut. Trevor catches this just in time and lashes out with his Morningstar Whip, hitting the demon's belly and sending fireworks flying everywhere. So the fight's heating up. The demon Trevor's been battling charges at him again, but this time, it's all about brute strength. Rushes the demon and takes it out with a solid stab. Just as this demon bites the dust, another one swoops in from behind. I bet Trevor's seriously questioning his life choices right now, especially since this one has wings and is a total nightmare to keep up with. One second it's in his face, and the next, it's dragging him through a world of hurt. Trevor fights back with whatever he's got, literally using a pair of bones, and manages to put the demon on the defensive. After recovering from a nasty fall, Trevor picks up the pace, goes full throttle, and knocks the demon off a high platform with a solid stab. But of course, there's no rest for the wicked. Another demon shows up and attacks him. Meanwhile, over in Brela, your not-so-bright bishop is getting roasted in the river because he didn't have the sense to leave before the spell kicked in. He's toast, and Carmilla's crew wastes no time. They shoot some kind of makeshift bridge across the river to get to Dracula's castle. The vampire army charges full steam ahead, and Carmilla drags Hector along, letting him know there's no backing out now. Poor dude's got no choice and bolts like a scared goat. Back at the Belmont digs, Trevor's still in the thick of it, trying to finish off the last demon. Sypha, being sneaky, slips away from the fight and grabs some books while Alucard's busy working on the enchanted mirror. She shows up where he's at, fires up her magic, and starts trying to take control of Dracula's castle through the mirror. While she's doing her thing, Carmilla's army reaches the castle and starts smashing at the door with this massive chunk of wood. The second it hits, Isaac knows something's off. When the gate opens, Isaac and a squad of vampires rush Carmilla's forces to stop them from getting to Dracula. At some point, Isaac heads upstairs to warn Dracula about the betrayal. He describes the enemy army's look, and Dracula instantly knows it's Carmilla behind the whole mess. That really sets him off. No way is anyone taking his castle. Meanwhile, Saifa's still struggling to get the castle under control because the engine room's gears are fighting back against her magic. Just in time, Trevor shows up and smashes a demon that was gunning for Saifa straight to hell. Saifa cranks up her magic, finally gets partial control of the castle, and it starts glitching out, disappearing and reappearing all over Bryla. The constant shifting floods the river, wiping out a good chunk of Carmilla's forces. At least Carmilla had the sense to grab Hector and Bale before things went south. The water floods Dracula's castle, taking out a bunch of vampires, but a few of the loyal ones manage to survive. In the end, Saifa gains full control of the castle and moves it out of Bryla. Turns out though, she parked it just a few steps away from the Belmont estate. Alucard keeps his cool, but you can tell the pressure's on. He knows it's time to face his dad. The castle's a war zone, and Dracula's losing his cool, making the moon glow blood red. With the clock ticking, Alucard's holed up in the library, plotting his next move. He steps out with Saifa and meets up with Trevor, ready to bounce. Saifa works her magic, literally, and whips up an ice path to get them all out of the underground lair. Once they hit the surface, Alucard takes the lead toward the castle, even though he's clearly not psyched about facing his dad. Inside the castle, chaos is popping off, but screeches to a halt when Alucard shows up. The enemy vamps team up, putting their beef aside to take on Alucard, Trevor, and Saifa. Alucard kicks things off, unleashing his magic sword and charging at the enemy. Trevor doesn't hold back either, wrecking a vamp with his whip and sending its soul straight to hell. Meanwhile, Saifa's in full-on firebending mode, throwing flames to keep the vamps off her. Alucard goes beast mode, literally, turning into a wolf and ripping out a vamp's throat. Another vamp tries to get slick, but Alucard summons his sword and takes him out. Saifa's basically outdoing Avatar Korra at this point, pulling ice out of nowhere and using it like bullets to take down a gang of vamps. Two generals rush her, but Trevor steps in to handle one. The other one? Yeah, she falls for a trap Saifa set, and let's just say she gets sliced in half. Definitely not the good kind. Trevor's busy throwing hands with a skilled vamp in close combat. He's dodging attacks like a pro, then traps the vamp with his whip. The last thing the vamp sees is the explosive end of Trevor's Morning Star whip blowing up in his face. Alucard's up against a sneaky vamp general who's using smoke clones to mess with him. It's a tough fight, but Saifa steps in and freezes her solid. Saifa then launches Trevor into the air, and he teams up with Alucard to take out two generals at once. Meanwhile, Isaac's holding it down, stopping the enemy vamps from getting to Dracula. He's laying them out with his whip, and notices Alucard's made it into the castle. Even as a human, Isaac's got moves. He dodges Alucard's sword aimed right at his bald head, but Isaac doesn't waste time. He reports to Dracula about Alucard's arrival and follows him to his room. Dracula's shocked that Isaac, a regular human, is willing to risk it all to protect him. But while Isaac's distracted, Dracula pulls a fast one, using his magic mirrors to send Isaac off to the desert. When Isaac gets to the other side of the mirror, he gets up and immediately tries to head back to Dracula, but the portal shuts behind him. Dropping to his knees in pain, he beats himself up for not noticing the mirrors earlier. Meanwhile, Alucard finds his dad on the other side and steps up to challenge him to a fight. Even though Dracula hasn't fed in years, he's ready to give his son a serious beatdown. But when Trevor and Saifa show up, Dracula gets all serious. The fight kicks off with Alucard swinging his sword and shoving Dracula into a wall, but Dracula blocks it like it's nothing and smacks Alucard hard across the face. Then Trevor jumps in, only to get speared into the corner of an alley. Saifa shows up just in time to catch some hits herself, but flips the script by blasting fire at Dracula's face. The fight keeps going until Dracula gets fed up, tosses her to the ground, and moves on. Trevor, pissed off, charges Dracula and lands a bunch of punches, but Dracula doesn't even flinch. He grabs Trevor for a chokeslam, but Alucard steps in and saves him just in time. Saifa tries burning Dracula again, but it doesn't do much. Dracula backs off for a second, only to slap both Saifa and Alucard to the ground. Trevor tries to stake Dracula but fails. The three team up and manage to get a few hits in, but it's not much. Trevor does the most damage when he pulls out the Morning Star whip and hits Dracula with it. After the explosion, Dracula is still standing but collapses to the ground soon after, realizing his opponents aren't messing around. He steps up his game, summoning a massive fireball and launching it at Alucard. Saifa does her best to hold it back but gets shoved aside in seconds. Alucard and Trevor jump in to help, and together they send the fireball back at Dracula. Alucard follows it up and slams it into his dad, causing an explosion that sends them all flying to another part of the castle. This time, it's just Dracula and Alucard, face to face. Dracula takes the offensive, using his speed and raw power to overwhelm his son. They clash mid-air, but Dracula clearly has the upper hand. After a few punches, Alucard is forced on the defensive. The fight carries on into another room where Alucard struggles to get back on his feet. Desperate, he grabs a nearby stake and tries to use it on Dracula. Dracula just laughs, but Alucard fires back, saying Dracula died the day Lisa did. Alucard believes his dad wants to die, and he manages to stab Dracula in the chest. He misses the heart by a few inches though, and the fight continues. This time, Alucard keeps up with his father, who's starting to look worn out. In the gear room, Alucard takes a brutal beating, but eventually snaps and activates his speed mode. Dracula can barely keep up as Alucard blitzes him with a flurry of punches. For a moment, it looks like Alucard has the upper hand, but his luck runs out, and Dracula slams him into the ground. The hit knocks Alucard out cold, and he only wakes up after taking another hard punch to the face. As he struggles to stand, Dracula comes at him again, relentlessly pounding him. But then Dracula stops, realizing they're in the room where Alucard grew up. The rage drains from his face, and the moonlight shifts back to normal. Overcome with guilt, Dracula admits he doesn't want to fight his son anymore. He's ready to die. As Alucard approaches with the stake, Dracula stands there, accepting his fate. Alucard hesitates, but finds the strength to stab him in the heart. As Dracula's body tries one last attack, Trevor steps in and decapitates him. Moments later, Sypha burns Dracula's remains, sending him to hell. After it's all over, Alucard feels the weight of what he's done. Trevor and Sypha try to comfort him, reminding him he saved humanity, but the guilt is too much to shake. At least he manages to hold back his tears in front of them, because if he hadn't, well, who knows. Later that morning, Alucard is strolling through the castle, trying to clean up the mess from the battle a few hours earlier. The place is a total wreck. Sypha is blown away by all the cool science gadgets and structures in the castle. She tries to play it off like she didn't mess up the engine room, but Trevor calls her out, reminding her she used her magic to force the gears to move. After their little bickering session, she starts wondering what Alucard's next move is now that Dracula's gone. Alucard shows up right then and says he's been thinking about heading to his vault in Gresset. Trevor cuts in and offers Alucard the Belmont estate, asking him to look after Dracula's castle and his family's knowledge. Alucard's totally caught off guard. He never thought Trevor, of all people, would offer something so big. Meanwhile, out in the desert, Isaac is kneeling by an oasis, trying to drink some water. A group of guys on horseback shows up and starts messing with him. At first, Isaac ignores them, but when their leader, a cocky guy, threatens to eat him, Isaac snaps. He takes them all out, one by one, in a pretty brutal fashion. One guy even gets his face peeled off. By the end, they're all dead. That night, Isaac cooks up some meat over a fire and eats it for dinner. When he's done, he starts thinking about whether he should use alchemy on the fresh corpses. In the end, he decides to bring them back as demons to help him out. The next day, Isaac continues his trek through the desert, now with his demon crew riding alongside him on horses. Later that morning, Sypha chats with Trevor about everything they've been through together. She mentions she's supposed to meet up with her people soon, but says she'd love to go on more adventures with Trevor when she gets back. She's hyped up by all the monsters she's defeated and the fact that she's dodged death so many times. It's lit a fire in her to keep exploring and making memories with Trevor. Trevor listens to her wild plans and, surprisingly, agrees. It's clear Sypha's gotten pretty attached to him. She's super comfortable around him now. Their conversation wraps up as she grabs his arm and they watch the sunset together. Back in Braila, Carmilla is lurking in the shadows, asking Hector when the sun will set. Instead of running away during the day, the guy just sticks around and lets the night catch up to him. Once the sun's down, Carmilla removes her cloak and says she's heading back to Styria. Hector asks her about Dracula's castle, curious about why it moved the way it did a couple of nights ago. So, Hector finds out the castle's rigged with magic, and Dracula's apparently dead. Carmilla's pretty sure about it since she used some enchanted mirrors to scope the place, but there's no trace of Dracula. Hector's totally floored by the news, but Carmilla tries to lift his spirits. Then, just as he's feeling a little better, she turns around and treats him like a pet dog, putting him on a leash. While Hector's still trying to wrap his head around what's happening, Carmilla beats the crap out of him. It gets so bad that he raises his hand, begging for mercy, but she just keeps going. After all those years working for Dracula, this is what Hector gets, getting smacked around by a controlling vampire who thinks she's better than everyone else. Once Carmilla's done, she licks the blood off him and calls him a good pet. Time passes, and her crew gets ready to leave Braila for Styria. Hector's stuck holding onto the leash around his neck, trying not to get dragged through the dirt. He instantly regrets it, but it's too late. Carmilla's in charge now. Meanwhile, Trevor and Sypha are getting ready to leave Dracula's castle. Alucard watches them from the background, and when they're done, Sypha says her goodbyes. Trevor gives a polite wave, but Alucard flips him the bird with a smirk. Trevor just cracks up, drops an F-bomb, and rides off in the carriage. Out in the woods, Sypha's all hyped up for their next adventure together. Honestly, it seems like she's seeing herself as Trevor's girl, but hey, let's not overthink it. Back at the castle, Alucard heads inside and starts seeing a vision of his dad. The hallucination fades after a while, and he tries to remember what the castle must have felt like to his father when he was still alive. He eventually makes his way to his dad's old study, sits down, and starts reminiscing about being a kid. As all the memories come rushing back, he sees a vision of his mom and breaks down, crying like a little kid.